All right, so this is episode 57 of the Big Blue in the Bronx podcast. Vincent Rapisardi joins me now. Vincent, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I want to get into four mini subjects that really concern the Giants, especially this week. Before we get into the Buccaneers preview, obviously we face them on Monday night. Should the Giants trade for a receiver like John Ross? In my opinion, I don't think it's a bad addition. And I obviously wouldn't give up too much for him because he is just, scrambling to get out of Cincinnati right now. He doesn't even want to play for the team. What's your objective on trading for a wide receiver, especially to help Daniel Jones?
Yeah, I think it seems like a lot of people, aside from Kenny Golladay, because I think there were a decent amount of people on Twitter who liked the idea of trading for a player like Kenny Golladay, but let's say a player like John Ross or any receiver in general. I think for the most part, unless it's a young stud wide receiver and the price isn't too high, a lot of people like it, but usually most people are against making a trade for a receiver, with the Giants being 1-6. But I'm opposed to that because I do think that you need to give your young quarterback as many good weapons as possible and make sure that he's the guy. That's the most important thing. You need to know if Daniel Jones is the guy moving forward. Some people believe he is. Some people believe he's not. So if I were the GM, I would make a trade. It doesn't mean you have to give up a first-round pick or a second-round pick. But a player like John Ross, if he could take a flyer and add another talented player, I mean, he hasn't really done much over his career. He's been injured, hasn't really been available. So you're not getting any sure bet by trading for him, but you do add some talent. In general, if I were the Giants, I would not be opposed to trading for a wide receiver, putting Daniel Jones in a good position, because the thing is, even if the Giants, look, they're not going to do anything special this year. I think we could all agree on that. Even if they compete in the NFC moving forward, and all right, they're a game or two out here or there, they're probably not going to do much after that except compete in the NFC because it's such a bad division. But if Daniel Jones plays well, let's say the next half of the season, the second half of the season really plays well, then all of a sudden, I think they're feeling a lot better. Even if they only win 4 games or they win 5 games, at least they know, oh, wow, Daniel Jones really played better. They added, let's say, a wide receiver. Looks like it helped him out, and they can go forward knowing, okay, this guy can be the franchise quarterback, or maybe if they make a trade and he doesn't play well, then they know he's not.
I could get on two sides when it comes to the Kenny Golladay argument, but I could really see a trade for John Ross, being that, he's low risk. He hasn't done anything really in his career because of his injuries, all the other stuff. And I don't think Cincinnati would ask for something like a third-round pick, more like a 6th and a 7th. And if I'm not mistaken, John Ross's fifth-year option, he was a first-round pick in, I believe, 2016 or 2017. His option was declined, so you're only getting, the rest of the year out of him. And if he works, fine, you sign him to, not big money deal, but at the same time, if he doesn't work, you just know from now on, that he isn't one of your receivers in the future.
Of course, it's kind of like one of those low risk, high reward kind of deals. Obviously, former first round pick. There's definitely talent there, and he's a guy that can stretch the field. And I think that's something I talked about before the season. I thought they needed another Darius Slayton kind of player, and that's who John Ross is. And Darius Slayton kind of banged up. And Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, those guys are going to catch passes. They're going to have a low yards before catch. They're not going to catch passes further down the field for the most part. They're not going to have high targeted air yards. So to have a backup plan for Darius Slayton at least, and maybe something more in John Ross, I say why not? As long as it's you're not giving up too much. 6th, 7th round pick would sound pretty good for the Giants, I'm sure.
And a lot of people were talking about, Darius Slayton, he's going to be a number 1. Well, I don't necessarily think he's the number 1 for a lot of reasons. And I'm not, totally stabbing him in the back and saying that, but he's a good receiver. He just can't carry the load every time when, Golden Tate isn't getting separation, or someone else like Damian Ratley. Because I guess now we've seen that, after that Cowboys game, they cut Damian Ratley after they, got him on the waiver wire and cut Corey Coleman. So I guess that was a bust. But to see if they elevate Coleman on Monday to kick return, obviously maybe he'll get an extended look in the offense. But that's my main view on that, obviously. And one of my, a lot of people will say, take Trevor Lawrence next year, take Penei Sewell. I honestly think they should probably take a wide receiver for right now. Obviously, my prospect will change on that. But, you give Daniel Jones another weapon, and we'll see how he does through the rest of the year with this offensive line play and also the wide receiver play, see how it goes if Slayton or Shepard get banged up, if that affects them.
Of course, and I mean, I think without Sterling Shepard, Daniel Jones is obviously not as good of a quarterback because at the end of the day, you need to give your quarterback weapons. Your young quarterback, you need weapons. I think the way I look at it is, a young quarterback, you want to give him his first, second-year quarterback, maybe even third-year quarterback. You want to give him as many weapons as possible, as many good players around him on offense as possible, so that you can figure out if he's the guy or if he's not. And if he has all those players and he's not the guy, he's not performing, then he's not the guy. But when it comes to like a veteran 10, 12-year quarterback who's a franchise quarterback, that player you hope can elevate players, just like Eli elevated Victor Cruz. I mean, Victor Cruz is an undrafted player. If Victor Cruz had some average, whatever quarterback, I don't know if he would have done what he had accomplished in 2011 and 2012. I don't know if he would have been that player, but he had a really good franchise quarterback in Eli Manning that I definitely feel like elevated a player like Victor Cruz. So with young players, young quarterback like Daniel Jones, you want to give him as many weapons as possible. And I really thought Dave Gettleman kind of messed up in the draft, not even drafting a wide receiver. This past draft class was pretty deep at wide receiver, and he didn't use a single pick. And I think he had to know that Sterling Shepard had concussion issues last year. He's been a little bit injury prone, so you can't really trust him to play a full 16 games. Obviously, that's not going to be true this year either. Golden Tate getting up there in age. I like Darius Slayton. I agree with you. I think Darius Slayton's a good receiver. I just don't think he's a number one. But I think he's a really good wide receiver too. And I think if you can get another elite receiver, I wouldn't be against the Giants taking a wide receiver in the first round. The only thing I would say is in recent years, it seems like there's been a lot of good wide receivers in the draft. It seems like you really find like good, talented receivers in the second, third, fourth round. Even like a player like Chase Claypool in this past draft class looks like a stud. So I would be against the first wide receiver in the first round for the Giants. But also there's usually a lot of talent at wide receiver in the draft.
So the next topic, obviously, it was kind of expected from the way Andrew Thomas, came in the draft. Nobody in their right mind would expect him to be, the best tackle in the NFL. Being a rookie, fourth overall is a lot of expectations. But it's a tricky situation right now because he's probably among, or if not the worst tackle in the NFL, 6 sacks, 37 pressures so far. Matt Parrott showed a lot, I would say, in that Redskin game at left tackle. And, he also had Cameron Fleming. So, in your mind, if you were Joe Judge, what would you do as far as to get Thomas, I would say more playing time, but at the same time, good reps, better reps, make sure he does better? Would you put him at right tackle, put Parrott at left tackle? Would you do the opposite and put Parrott in at right tackle? Would you keep doing what they're doing right now, which putting Parrott in sometime at left tackle, sometime at right tackle, keep Fleming on the field? What would you do?
So I would put Andrew Thomas at right tackle. That's something I've tried to be. I've been very outspoken with because at the end of the day, fourth overall pick, a lot of pressure on this guy to step in and be Walter Jones. That's what people expected, and I thought, relax. I understand he's the fourth overall pick, but there's a lot of pressure on this guy to all of a sudden be this franchise left tackle day one. So if I were the Giants, I would put him at right tackle. Because right now he's struggling badly, as you talked about, the amount of sacks, the amount of pressure. His pass block win rate is terrible too. It's among the worst among tackles in the NFL. At one point, it was like 149th of 167 offensive linemen. So he's been bad. And I think what you do, at least, you split snaps with Cam Fleming at right tackle and let Matt Parrott play left tackle. Seems like you said, like he played well in the Washington game. So you play Matt Parrott at left tackle, and I think you play Andrew Thomas at right tackle, at least splitting snaps, maybe just being a full-time starter at right tackle. Try and get his confidence back, take a little pressure off the guy. You don't want to ruin a player, especially at his position at left tackle. It's not an easy position. This is what I think people don't get. If Andrew Thomas was a wide receiver, and let's say he dropped 12 passes over the course of his rookie season, but he caught 10 touchdowns, people would say, okay, he dropped some passes, but 10 touchdowns, wow, he had a good year. All right, he has a lot of potential. But when you're an offensive tackle, if you give up a sack a game, they remember that. People remember that. They say, wow, no, Andrew Thomas, another week he gave up a sack. Wow, he's terrible. And that's all they look at. They don't look at, wow, he made a good block. No, they're going to look at, wow, he gave another sack. They always look at the bad place. It's a thankless position. So that's why I was in favor of starting him at right tackle, taking a little pressure off him. I know people say, oh, it's the same thing. It's edge rushers. No, it's not the same thing. That's why everyone was saying Andrew Thomas is the left tackle of the future, because people understood the importance of the blind side position, and now people want to switch their opinion, and say no, they're the same. No, they're not. Play him at right tackle, take some pressure off him, see see how he plays, and really judge it from there. Because right now it's bad. It's been a bad start for him. Take some pressure off the guy. I would say start him at right tackle. Take the spotlight off him a little bit.
Honestly, I would not be mad. Now, there's obviously select Giant fans that would be mad because, oh, he was drafted for this reason. I wouldn't be mad if Parrott was the franchise left tackle and Thomas was the franchise right tackle, in my opinion, because it still works out either way.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course.
Yeah. If the draft was tomorrow, I know who I'm picking. Have you checked out on any of the prospects yet? Do you have like an ideal position or ideal player? If the draft was tomorrow, who would you be picking?
That's a tough one. I really haven't done too much draft preparation at this point, because I'm still undecided on what direction the Giants are going to go with their quarterback. I'm not totally done with Daniel Jones, but at the same time, I don't know. I'm in the middle. I still need to see more from him, and I think it really, really depends, and it depends on what happens with Dave Gettleman too. I've said, if Dave Gettleman stays for whatever reason, let's say he is the Giants general manager moving forward after the season, then Daniel Jones is the starting quarterback moving forward, and that's it. Or at least for one more season, But if Dave Gettleman goes, then all of a sudden I think that's it for Daniel Jones. I mean, unless he plays great at the end of the season, I think that's it for Daniel Jones. So it could depend. Maybe a player like Justin Fields. I know a lot of people talk about Trevor Lawrence, but Justin Fields, he's playing really well tonight. I like Justin Fields a lot, and I think that he wouldn't be a bad pick. I don't think the Giants are going to get the number one pick. I think the Jets are a lot worse than the Giants.
Yeah.
So I don't think the Giants will have an opportunity to take a Trevor Lawrence. But I think Justin Fields, if this Daniel Jones thing doesn't work out and Dave Gettleman gets fired and the new GM has, let's say, the number 2 or number 3 pick in the draft, I think a player like Justin Fields wouldn't be a bad idea. But again, we'll have to watch and see how Daniel Jones plays in the second half of the season moving forward.
Now, I think, obviously, it depends on how the Giants finish the season. They have a tough schedule. They have, 4 out of 6 teams in the second half of the season that are competing in the division. There's the Cardinals, there's the Seahawks, there's the Browns, there's the Ravens as well. And I think a lot of people are going to be pissed off. Let's just say the Giants, maybe Daniel Jones, isn't that guy. And it's also the expectation, too. It's not just about the play. That Daniel Jones is sort of like an Eli Manning. He's not going to make fantastic plays. He's going to make the plays that he's supposed to, though. And people are going to be like, oh, well, that's not good enough for a 6th overall pick. Let's draft a quarterback. And what's going to turn out to be is, let's just say, I think the Jets are still going to get the 1st overall pick. I do agree with you on that. Let's say select Trevor. If the new GM, if there is a new GM, doesn't like Justin Fields or Trey Lance, then I think, he's going to go against this thing where it's like, oh, automatic upgraded quarterback. He might draft an offensive lineman to help Daniel Jones and see where they're at. He might draft maybe a cornerback or a linebacker just to, spice in the defense. Or he might draft a wide receiver. So I just think that a lot of Giant fans, automatic upgraded quarterback. You still have other positions on the field that you need to fix. You don't know if Thomas is going to make it out, with the new GM. I mean, that's, a little crazy to think, but who knows? We've seen crazier things before. And then Ryan Lewis, he's not your second cornerback, and Devontae Downs, he's not your second linebacker. So those are the things that Giants need to think long-term going into next year, but obviously we are not there yet.
No, of course. And in terms of the quarterback situation, if there was a new GM, I said this about Ron Rivera. With the Redskins, the Washington football team having the 2nd pick in last year's draft, and I said I would have taken either Tua or Herbert. And I think a lot of people are like, no, that's crazy. Chase Young's the best player. I said I know Chase Young is the best player in the draft, but at the same time, your first year as head coach, football operations position that he has the opportunity to draft his quarterback, his future quarterback. There's some good options there with Tua and Herbert. So, and I don't know, maybe they messed up. Maybe they missed here because now they don't know who their quarterback is. They don't know what pick they're going to have. I'm not saying they can't. Maybe this year they draft their quarterback and they're fine. But he had a great opportunity in his first season to draft a potential franchise quarterback and decided to go for an edge rusher. It may work out. We'll have to see in the long run. But I feel like most GMs or most people in those situations, first year you have a good pick and you have an opportunity to take, there's some good quarterbacks available. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a new GM came in and said Justin Fields or Trey Lance or whoever's available there for the Giants. Because at the end of the day, that quarterback, the job of the GM really relies on the quarterback.
So Mark Ross, I know that after he had left the Giants, he had said, I think he kind of said that, all right, we wanted to move on from Eli, years before, but they wouldn't let us. John Mara obviously had a special connection with Eli, and we kind of know how that went. But in terms of most GMs, they want to draft their own quarterback. They want to trade from. They want to bring in their own guy, because at the end of the day, that guy is really he's going to be the reason you're good or you're bad. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. Sure, you can have teams where you have a great defense and just dominates and you win football games, but for the most part, you got to get your franchise quarterback. And if a new GM comes into the Giants, I think that's I think that's probably going to happen unless Daniel Jones just plays so well over the next what do we got 9 games. So we'll see.
And going back to your point on like Mark Ross, there were reports, multiple reports coming out like year and a half after Ben McAdoo was fired, that Ben McAdoo wanted to trade up for Patrick Mahomes. How wild would that have been? But they said no. Let's take a third-round quarterback instead.
Yeah, that was interesting. I think that's definitely one story that people love to talk about, and fair enough. Look, if Ben McAdoo drafts Patrick Mahomes, Ben McAdoo's probably still head coach of the New York Giants. That just kind of goes to show you how important it is to get a quarterback and make sure you get the right guy. And it's so weird, Davis Webb. They take Davis Webb and then doesn't even start a game. You take him to the third round and then he's gone. And then he's gone because Dave Gettleman took over. So you got a new regime. Dave Gettleman didn't draft Davis Webb. So I think that's actually a great lesson. That's kind of a great point in this is, when guys don't draft certain guys. I think you had mentioned about Andrew Thomas. You wouldn't be surprised if the new GM came in. You never know. Maybe they get rid of Andrew Thomas. Maybe they trade Andrew. You never know. As crazy as it sounds right now, a new GM comes in. You never know what to expect.
And going back to, not going back to, but like going towards a point of mine, starting now. It seems to me, obviously, a lot of Giants fans want Dave Gettleman fired. And, some is to blame on him, some is not to blame on him. With some of the moves he's made, some of the trades he's made, unfortunately, like some players have regressed under his draft class. But we've really seen it in the last couple of years of just like sports in general, but I've really identified it as like mostly football. I know a lot of people could come up with like more examples than I can. You look at the Jets and what they did with John Idzik, but you also look at the Giants and what they're doing with Gettleman. Reports are saying that Mara's going to fire him after the end of the year. As much as Gettleman has done, maybe not for the best of this organization, you still have to see his plan throughout. And, maybe people were convinced, Pat Shurmur's not the guy. But that was his quarterback that he drafted, even though reports came out later that he said, okay, I wanted Drew Lock. But, I just think short tenures for these GMs and for these head coaches, in the last couple of years mean that the organizations are dysfunctional. And, I think if the Giants elect to fire Gettleman, whether it's a good reason, whether it's not a good reason, we're going to turn into the Jets, and maybe, Mara doesn't make smart decisions going forward, even though he loves them. But, some of the decisions he hasn't made for the best.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Dave Gettleman situation is just so tricky because, every Giants fan wants him fired. I always try to be as realistic as possible whenever I talk about the Giants and try and objectively view them. I think one thing that people don't get, first of all, the Giants are still in the process of rebuilding. Sure, they should have taken. You would have expected them to take better strides than they currently have, especially on offense. Sure, fair enough. But this is still a team that I think at best most thought would win 6 or 7 games. I think most people probably realistically would think that they would win that many, that amount of games. So, people wanted Dave Gettleman fired last year, and I said, okay, but you realize when a new GM comes in, he wants to start over. He wants new players. He wants this. He wants new quarterback, do this, do that. And then all of a sudden, you thought, all right, the Giants are just going to pick up where they are at, and they're going to move forward, and he's going to keep the players that Dave Gettleman had brought in and built up, and then he's just going to continue to build on it and win. And sometimes they don't want that. What if a new GM comes in and says, you know what, Dexter Lawrence, he's cool and all, but we don't need kind of a good run-stuffing defensive tackle. I'd rather trade him and get a third-round pick. Or, we don't need, a Daniel Jones. We'll trade him, we'll get a fourth-round pick. All of a sudden, those are guys that were first-round picks, first-round value, and now you're getting, let's say, third, fourth-round picks in return from them. You're starting over, new players, new draft picks that are going to take years to develop. You just never know. That's the point. And so a lot of people want to get him fired. Last year I said, I don't know. I mean, he's still rebuilding the team. I don't think it makes much sense to fire him. Let him continue to rebuild the team. He had a great draft, not a great free agent class this past offseason, but Bradbury, Martinez, and Fackrell, they've been outstanding. So I know everyone thinks that he's the worst GM to ever walk the planet, but no, he's made some interesting moves. He's made some good moves. And look, they're a rebuilding team. They're a developing team. Let's call them a developing team. So you're going to expect them to not play that great. You're going to expect them to have their bumps in the road. I did think that they would compete more than they currently have. I didn't think they would be. 1-6. That's not a great spot. They've had some definitely winnable games, close games. But at the end of the day, really, the second half of the season is going to be huge for Dave Gettleman. So everyone wants to find a savior. They want to find a savior for the Giants. Oh, fire Jerry Reese and Dave Gettleman will be great. Now it's fire Dave Gettleman, someone else will be great. And fire Ben McAdoo, someone will be great. And Pat Shermer, fire him, someone else will be better. We keep looking for a savior. It's amazing how people just keep looking for a savior, putting too much expectations on these people. And they're not living up to expectations, which makes it worse. It makes it more, oh my gosh. The amount of negativity, it's like enough.
Yeah, and, we could be heading in that path, and I'm not going to, totally be negative about it, but people just, act like Jets fans. Jets fans appreciate their team more than some Giants fans. It's unfortunate. Going into the preview now, I know I saw your Twitter a couple minutes before we did this. You started posting, Tampa Bay Bucks defense. I think it was like EPA or something. I'm gonna go through just individual stats here. Their offense is 15th in total yards per game, 8th in passing yards per game. Their pass rate, I believe, is 11th in the NFL. Rushing yards, they're 21st. They split the backfield with Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, and then 3rd in points. Their defense is 3rd in total yards per game, 9th in passing yards, 1st in rushing yards. Best run defense, and also 8th in points. But you compare them to the Giants, their offense in total yards is 31st, passing yards 30th, rushing yards 27th, and then points 31st. Defense total yards 13th, passing yards 21st, rushing yards 8th, and points 4th. Now, this may be an unreal expectation. I don't know what you think about this, Vincent, but as much as the Giants are 1-6, they've stayed in mostly every contest. Now, they haven't played all 4 quarters, but I don't think it's an unreal expectation to see them compete in this game. Sure, maybe the offensive line might get destroyed because of the defensive line they're facing, but I sort of compare it to the Pittsburgh game where, Pittsburgh was coming in with some of the best defenders on the side of the ball, and the best run defense or the best pass defense, and the Giants competed, I would say, well overall. Obviously they made some mistakes, but as I said, everybody's gonna say, oh, this is a blowout. Oh, the spread said this. This person said that. They're betting on the Buccaneers to beat the Giants by 3 scores. No, I honestly think it's gonna be a close game. It's just whether it slips away from the Giants.
I think this is going to be a really tough matchup for them. Looking at in terms of EPA, I think I had actually just tweeted something out before. Tampa Bay's defense, this is going to be a tough match. I think this is going to be an interesting matchup in the sense it's one of those, if Daniel Jones and the Giants offense plays well, then wow, okay, that's pretty impressive. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they got blown out. Right now, Tampa Bay on defense, they're number 1 in defensive EPA. They have the 4th best pass defense in terms of EPA, the 2nd best run defense in EPA, 2nd best pass rush win rate, and 2nd best run stop win rate. They're playing an incredible defense. This Tampa Bay defense is really, really good. So I don't think the Giants are going to win this football game. There's nothing that makes me believe they're actually going to win this game. If they stay competitive, I think that's a positive. But this really, again, I think moving forward at this point, it's getting to the point where it's Daniel Jones. What do we see with him? And it's simple as that. Is Daniel Jones playing well? Is Daniel Jones not playing well? That's really the main focus because that Eagles loss, that was tough. They should have won that game. Really puts them in a tough spot in the division. It looks like Philadelphia's getting some players back that were injured. It looks like they're getting a little bit more healthy. So I don't know. I don't know. It's going to be a tough matchup for the Giants, no question.
It's going to be interesting. And, some players to look out for before I get to my keys to the game are obviously Ndamukong Suh, Antoine Winfield, Carlton Davis, Jamal Dean, Shaq Barrett, and JPP, who leads the team with 5.5 sacks. And then you look at the offensive side of the ball, Tom Brady, Mike Evans, and Rob Gronkowski. Now, obviously, James Bradbury has been one of the best corners in the league. So, will he struggle? We don't know. It could be expected. But let's just say, Bradbury holds him like he held Amari Cooper, right? And, I would expect Tom Brady to target either Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson, or Rob Gronkowski, because even though statistically the Giants haven't been that bad against tight ends this year, you saw the last game what they did to Richard Rodgers, or what they, how they covered him. It wasn't that great. The chunk plays got to them. So I would expect, and especially for the size of Rob Gronkowski, he's 6'6", and he's a big dude, and he wants the ball. He's not just a run blocking tight end as people poise him to be. But I think he can have a great game if Evans is locked down, and Tom Brady goes, you know what? Evans is obviously not available. Let me attack Rob Gronkowski. Let me attack that secondary, because I don't know who they'll have on him. They might have a safety, or they might even have somebody like Devontae Downs or Ryan Lewis. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Look, I mean, the Giants at this point, they're kind of just in a situation where DeAndre Baker really, really hurt them. Because now, like you said, they're playing Ryan Lewis, and they're playing, Madre Harper. They had Corey Ballentine as their starting cornerback week 1 opposite James Bradbury. They're just in a tough spot. They don't have enough personnel at this point. It's funny because even with like James Betcher last year, people would say all the time about James Betcher, he's defense isn't good enough, and yeah, the defense isn't good enough because there's no good players. At the end of the day, you need players, you need talent. Now, there are certain coaches that can elevate teams and units. Sure, there are great coaches out there that are great schematically, can get the most out of certain players. But right now, the Giants in their secondary, they don't have Xavier McKinney. DeAndre Baker, obviously, he's gone. So they lost 2 big pieces. McKinney hopefully will be back at the end of the year for the Giants. But yeah, when you're playing Ryan Lewis, Ryan Lewis, look, I think he showed some things, during this season. I think he played well against the Rams. So, as a depth option moving forward, yeah, I think next year the Giants have someone that, okay, he's shown he can at least make the team, and he can provide some depth if they need him here, to start a game here or there because of injury. Then you got a guy. But they're limited right now in the secondary with McKinney and not having a legitimate cornerback too. I mean, Ryan Lewis and Madre Harper, those guys were practice squad level guys for a reason. And the same thing with Corey Ballentine, before he really lost any opportunity. He lost his opportunity, but talking about a 6th round pick. I mean, you're talking about players undrafted, or you're talking about practice squad, 6th round pick. These guys are not expected to make a big difference. And as we've seen, they haven't. They haven't made a difference. Much of a difference, a big difference.
And it kind of hurts. I mean, obviously he was out for one game. That was the last game. But it doesn't help in some cases. Obviously, Darnay Holmes was injured, but it doesn't help. He was struggling for the first, 3 games this season. And then he got injured. And I think in a couple of cases you had Logan Ryan move to slot, and Julian Love, who has not been playing well this season, moved to the safety position. So it's going to be interesting with this secondary. And, it really is. It just, some things, I don't know. Will they take a corner next year? For the long term, I mean, obviously you have to look at free agent options. And, this is for the long term. We still got how many games to go? But do you draft a corner in the first 2 rounds? Do you get one in free agency for the short term? I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. But for my 3 keys to win, number 1, you need to stop Tampa Bay's pass rush. Will I think they do it? Absolutely not. Cover Rob Gronkowski, as I mentioned before. I feel like he's poised to have a big game if Mike Evans is locked down. And you need to put pressure on Tom Brady. I was watching Giants 1st and 10 the other day. I was at least watching part of it, and they had on Justin Tuck, and he's like, the reason why Brady lost the Super Bowl is because we kept putting pressure on him. How many times he's been sacked over his career, at least in the Super Bowl, by the Giants. They put pressure on him. That's what is the key to winning this game, and I think Patrick Graham understands that, and I think he's going to try to dilate something for this pass rush. But overall, I would like to see Carter Coughlin get more time on the field, because he actually didn't play any defensive snaps last game. Cam Brown played more.
Yeah, I mean, the Brady pressure thing, I get. At the same time, though, it's tough. It's tough because right now I'm looking at it, and He is what, the eighth quickest time to throw in the NFL. So he's a guy who gets rid of the football quick. And when you get rid of the football quick, it's tough to get after him. I mean, that virtually eliminates the ability to really rush a passer like Tom Brady when he's getting rid of the football 2.6 seconds. So it definitely sounds a little bit easier said than done. I think what we've seen with Patrick Graham too, especially on third downs, he doesn't really like to send more than 3 or 4 guys sometimes. It's a little bit questionable. I like Patrick Graham. I think he's actually done a very good job. I think the Giants are definitely an improved defense from last year, and that's still with a secondary that's banged up and doesn't have a good cornerback too, and traded Marcus Golden now, Lorenzo Carter being hurt, O'Shane Zimis being hurt. I mean, I think Patrick Graham's done a great job. I think he's been a great hire for the Giants. So, but that being said, it's tough to get pressure on Tom Brady just because he gets through the football so quickly. I think it was maybe a little bit easier to do that back in 2007, Super Bowl 42. And right now, the Bucks offense is clicking. I believe they lead the league in points scored. So it's going to be a tough matchup. If I'm the Giants, honestly, I would just send pressure consistently. I send extra men on the rush consistently, and I would blitz because I just think if you send 3 or 4, Tom Brady's just going to sit back there. He's going to find spots. He's going to pick you apart. I don't think the strategy against Tom Brady sitting there and sending 3 or 4 guys and just trying to have a natural pass rush. I don't think it's going to work. I just think he'll find spots and he'll pick you apart. So getting pressure on Brady is obviously the thing you want to do. It's tough to do that because he gets rid of the football so quickly. So that being said, I think Patrick Graham, dial up the blitz against Tom Brady and I don't know, force even quicker decision makings and trust your secondary a little bit more. I know it's tough because it's a bad secondary, but at the same time, I wouldn't say bad secondary, but it's a secondary that could be better. But at the same time, I think he's going to pick them apart if he's sitting back there and he's not being pressured, or there's no pressure, no one in his face, no one putting their hands up on a 3 or 4 man rush.
I think whether they go at him or maybe they stay off of him. I mean, obviously, part of the common sense thing is, okay, put pressure on Tom Brady. When he gets the ball out, though, you do need good covering personnel, not just cornerbacks. You need safeties or linebackers, whether he gets it to Gronk or maybe a third wide receiver like Scotty Miller. It really helps, though, that Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin are not going to be playing, because if that were to happen, I'm pretty sure I would be saying that the Giants would get blown out. Like, they could get blown out, but also it depends on whether they're going to stay in the game. It's just like the Pittsburgh game, It's whether they stay in it, whether they, kill themselves or they shoot themselves in the foot. It's gonna be really interesting. But it's the Buccaneers, so, and if we, I don't know, play, I would say decent, maybe it's like a 24-10 game or maybe something less than that. Who knows? Maybe we could, squeeze or compete against, 4 teams in the second half of the season where, they're competing for their respective divisions and they're over 500. So, I don't know. It's going to be a very interesting thing to look at. Vincent, thanks for coming on, man.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me.